Hi, this is Jordan Ramirez, and you are tuning in to a brand new episode of Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez. Apologies for the hiatus. But with me right now is our special podcast guest, and he is also a podcaster. Would you introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. I am Adam Blaylock. I probably should just keep it easy and say I host, but technically I facilitate a podcast called Heart Songs, the podcast, which
Mm,
is a guest-centric interview show, kind of a short-form show that allows the guests to tell their story, their life story, their artistic story through the lens of songs that have kind of been like mile markers in their life, and it's all based on this Weezer song from
mm.
a 2008 album. But point being, I do that, and besides that, I'm a musician. I have a band called Evening the Score, all one word. That's like 90s alternative rock, and I'm a filmmaker too.
Mm,
You can find my films at blayrock.com, BLAYROCK.
mm-hmm.
Um, to be honest, they're self-serving in that they both kind of tell different stories of things that I've done in my life. But
Mm.
anyway, they are
Yeah.
films nonetheless.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. So the film that he has picked is a remake of a French film, but we won't get too much into that.
I'm glad you caught that. Yeah.
Yes. I think I Love My Wife, directed by and starring Chris Rock, also written by Chris Rock and Louis C.K. Also in the cast, Gina Torres, Kerry Washington, Edward Herrmann, and Steve Buscemi. So,
Yeah.
why did you pick this film, and where and when did you see it?
Both great questions. The why really came down to the fact that when you were talking about film sort of in connection to or in relationship to music,
Mm-hmm.
um, this one specifically, I feels like hits a lot of really interesting tones in the way that music not only makes the movie fun, but
Mm-hmm.
also kind of like um, plays into the narrative and really kind of helps to, I guess, extrapolate some of the emotions of what's going on with the characters, which I really enjoy. But it also
Mm-hmm.
does that by using like contemporary music. So
Yeah.
it kind of even in the moment, I feel like one of the songs I'd love to talk about specifically had like just come out. So it was just so interesting that he was able to pull something so relevant and also kind of more of a B side of that
Yeah.
album and just make it really work with the movie. When did I see it? I saw it not long after it came out, and forgive me for not having dates in front of me. I want to say that was like '07 or '08 when it came
Oh,
out.
all right. So you mentioned connections to the film. Uh you so let's talk a little bit about the movie and the music topic so that
Mm-hmm.
we can see how the connection between these two topics are in relation to the film you have chosen.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I mean, I guess from my perspective, to be honest with you, there's actually a lot of music in it that I can still kind of hum or even sing along to in my head that I really haven't even gone out of my way to find out where it came from.
Mm-hmm.
But it does kind of seem to sit somewhere in the hip hop kind of soul R&B avenue, which
Mm-hmm.
considering this is a film by an African American man about um I think anyway about African American culture and kind of trying to juxtapose I guess race culture and things like that within the context of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the movie deals with really fun and really interesting tracks within that culture. That being said, when I mentioned there was one song in particular that I would love to hit on,
Okay.
in kind of the maybe the first third or maybe toward it's probably more the first third of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
The character played by and help me out with the name here. I apologize. Is it Regina King? Is she the one that plays the
Uh, oh, the
essentially the
wife
no
or
the I guess the antagonist technically the
Kerry Washington.
Kerry Washington. I'm so sorry. Thank you
No,
so much.
no.
I know the name, but I'm just gathering my thoughts, and it wasn't coming to me. So
Mm-hmm.
Kerry Washington is talking to Chris Rock's character in his office, and she picks up his iPod and starts shuffling through it, and makes this really funny joke about how he has N-word ears because
Mm-hmm.
his iPod has a lot of black music on it. And then she gives him her iPod, and she's like, let me show you some stuff. Listen to this track specifically. And it kind of hard cuts to Chris Rock sitting on the train going home. And it plays this Foo Fighters song that is
Mm.
called Tired of You. It's off the One by One album. And it's
Mm-hmm.
this really mellow, really it's just like this slow, clean guitar chugging song, and Dave Grohl's just singing these like, I don't know if wistful is even a good word for it, just kind of these like mildly obsessive lyrics about like this. And so in the context of the fact that at that point in the movie, what you've discovered is that Chris Rock's character definitely has a crush on this girl, and by this point she's kind of come back to his office or come back into his life a few times, and he's starting to, I guess, get comfortable with the
Mm-hmm.
concept that she's there, and maybe comfortable to the point of I guess flirtation, if that makes sense. It's
Yeah.
really interesting that when she talks about basically trying to introduce him to white music, it's I mean, aside from maybe like Bruce Springsteen, it's probably not too terribly arguable that Foo Fighters is one of the whitest rock bands on planet Earth. But
Mm-hmm.
besides that, the track that they use, and I'll tell you an aside to this in a second that I hope is interesting. The track that they use is so specific to him, I guess, starting to like go somewhere from fall in like with her to
Mm-hmm.
maybe starting to fall in lust with her. And there's
Mm-hmm.
something about the nature of this track that is so kind of slowly, simmeringly sexual that it's
Mm.
just so delightful. The aside that I'll tell you is maybe a year, maybe less than a year after I saw this movie, I
Mm-hmm.
happened to be flying to Burbank with my wife at the time.
Oh, okay.
And no lie, Chris Rock shows
Oh.
up in the airport, and he comes to like our terminal, and he's on the plane with me to Burbank. I'll just save you the suspense. I did not talk to him. I didn't bother him. I didn't want to. There was a
Mm.
lot of people already bothering him. But the thing that has always bothered me about the fact that I didn't talk to him is this
Mm.
movie was so fresh in my consciousness and so impactful to me that I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to ask him questions, including, was it you or Louis C.K. that thought of the Foo Fighters song? Did that come up later in meetings? Like, it's such a specific choice that I was so curious about why it
Mm-hmm.
happened, and have always regretted that I'll never know the answer to that question. Because, again, another aside, I am a massive Foo Fighters fan. So to be watching
Mm.
this Chris Rock movie and like his comedy, just expect to be receiving a story from a black artist about a black experience, and then hear one of my favorite songs come into the story just blew me away so hard. And then again, contextually, how it fit into the narrative,
Mm-hmm.
I will always regret that I didn't have a second to be like, Mr. Rock, I just have to know.
And now a message from Jordan Ramirez for Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez.
I want to take a break from this episode to thank my listeners/viewers who watch the videos on my YouTube channel and listen to each new episode on Spotify. While this show is a labor of love and passion that isn't about the movies that I like, this is also a show that is about the films that you like. Have a film that you want to recommend to the podcast? Make sure to recommend it in the comments section on YouTube and on Spotify, and you will receive a shout out in a future episode. Want to be a guest on the podcast? Click on the sign up form link in the episode description for further details. If you like this episode or my previous episodes, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more interviews in the near future. The goal for this channel is to reach up to 100 subscribers both on YouTube and on Spotify. It's just that easy. And now, back to our regularly scheduled episode. Yeah, absolutely. Um, but I did like, but in the context of the story, when I watched this film, I noticed that it was basically a morality tale between his married life, and I, as a movie fan, and I observed this from beginning to end. This is like from his first person perspective, like he's narrating his life story. He's talking about like internal thoughts that I mean other movies, like not just comedies but dramas, always do. Um
Mm-hmm.
and and what I love about this film, as I watch this movie, is that this is a morality tale, and he talks about how when you're when you're married and you're with somebody for almost 10 years, it feels boring. Like you don't have
Yes.
any excitement, you don't have any of the same joy of being a single person again. And he
Yep.
wanted to, enjoy the single life again. And here comes Kerry Washington's character coming back
Hmm.
into his life. And, he's playing with, am I going to leave my family
Hmm.
behind and just go with my, instincts of being single again? Or do I have to stick to my married life and, give up what I wanted before
Yeah.
my marriage? And that's what I thought was so interesting about this theme. And as you mentioned, the music that fit into the dynamic of this to fit in the narrative. And it's pretty interesting that um that a lot of movies I have seen that either use like that they call them like needle tracks where they just use a
Yeah.
specific song
Yeah.
for like a specific sequence in a movie. As you mentioned, like the Foo Fighters one, it does fit into that narrative, like going from, R&B, black soul music and, hip hop and rap to like white soft rock music that I thought
Yeah.
fits in with like his changing his like sort of abandoning his morals and then
Yeah.
slowly coming back to, the realization that he doesn't want to live this life anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. And
Yeah.
oh, I get some good points in there. I guess I was trying to listen to you, but I have an instinct to interrupt, and I was like, no, let him finish this out. This is really good stuff. But and
Mhm.
I feel like I forgot where my train of thought was going. But like, um, I guess it has to do with like when you talk about how the the movies about morality. It's so interesting that the overvoice, the narrative, where he's basically just kind of talking through his own experience, like
Mhm.
deals with the fact that I guess what American culture might quintessentially call just growing up or
Mhm.
becoming an adult, getting a job, starting a family. None of that genuinely removes your individuality. Like you can certainly get into the habit of playing a role that is I'm a banker, but in the mundaneness of life, minute by minute, life is going to remind you by anything as simple as a really pretty girl passing you and all those chemicals, all that biology boiling up inside of you. Like you will always be like the complicated ape that has needs that
Mhm.
aren't necessarily being fulfilled by that lifestyle. And then the way like that overvoiced narrative and him taking you inside of himself begins to be challenged by what you're watching him go through
Mhm.
with the with her introduction
Mhm.
into the mundane normalcy of his life. That like
Yeah.
not only did they use somebody that he used to know and he used to have a crush on, but they introduce her in a way where she's in a spot in her life where before he and her were just friends. That's the vibe you get from him. Like, yes, he was attracted to her, but she was with a buddy of his, so
Mhm.
that's that, and off he goes. Now she's being reintroduced as an actual option, and you kind of
Mhm.
see him struggling with the fact that, like, I mean, he's got something over here that he respects, and he loves his wife. He does, however, she hasn't even sexually paid attention to him in all this time, and now
Yeah.
he has a real chance, a real option to receive attention, to receive that physical intimacy that again biologically is stupid for
Mm.
a man or a woman to ignore. It
Mm.
doesn't make any sense to
Mhm.
ignore nature. And so
Mm.
to your point, like it's kind of it's a story about like how do we how do we cope? How do we deal with nature versus culture? Like
Mhm.
culture has established these norms like marriage, but you hold that up against the animal kingdom and like monogamy isn't important. Like it really is just about the evolutionary need to, reproduce. And so I don't know, it's like what's great about the movie Ingenious and why I would recommend it to anybody is on the one
Mhm.
hand, it makes a complete case for why monogamy is stupid and will
Mhm.
irritate you and drive you crazy until the end of your days. And it makes a case for why monogamy is beautiful and
Mhm.
and 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 how it enriches your life. Like the way they land this movie is so dangerously close to anybody that has problems with like infidelity, just writing it off and be like, nope, we already went too far. But it also doesn't, because there's things that he learns by going as far as he does that you get the feeling end up kind of resetting, recalibrating his life. And for me, even though that marriage that I was in at the time that I almost met him on a plane ended like a year or two later, I think this movie had a big impact on that, because I was able to ask myself some really profound questions by watching Chris ask himself some really profound questions. And it also would be worth noting that Chris's marriage that he was in at the time ended. Like it's, I guess the movie is a very hopeful statement about the nature of commitment and devotion, but his life would remind you that, yeah, there's not always happy endings, and sometimes you do mess up and there's no coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he almost had the option to leave his marriage near the end of the movie, but he decided, no, I'm not doing it, which I thought was a pretty interesting point in that film. I mean, there was also Steve Buscemi's character, his character George, who, oh my God, he's married for 15 years, yet he still cheats on his wife, and it's like, I don't care. I mean, I'm
wildly
still married.
Promiscuous. Yes.
He's like, I don't care. I'm married, and I go out seeing some woman, and so what?
It's like the genius of that part, which again, not that either of them would be interested in, like, I don't know, fessing up to like who had the idea between Chris and Louis, but like the genius of the Steve Buscemi character is that in the middle of Chris's character, I should say, going through this really moral question, like you talked about, to have a character standing right next to him in the story that doesn't have that problem and have that further challenge, like why he has the problem, and have him really try to ask himself questions of what he's capable of, is so beautifully done.
It is. I mean, it's wonderfully like contrasting between these two characters. I mean, like, one's very moralistic, and the other's like, so what?
But also like not an a-hole about it. And there's this conversation they have. I think it's the moment when Steve's the whole time. What's so funny about Steve's character is he's rooting for Chris's marriage the whole time. He's like, don't mess this up. The conversation where he finally gives him the Viagra, and where like even Chris in that moment is trying to like parse it out. He's like, so hold on. Like, you're going to go out with your intern tonight, and you're going to have all this sex, and then you're going to go home and crawl in bed with your wife and have no problems? Like, even the way Steve plays the scene where he's like, yeah, happily married, 20 years, man, it's not a big deal. Like, there's no malice in him. Like, he is the way he is, but he's, like, in his mind, he's not even cheating on his wife. It's almost like that's a separate part of his life, and, like, this is his hobby, which, again, the reference to the Captain Save-A-Ho thing is the perfect way to talk about it, because with Chris, and again, why this movie is so genius and these characters are just so well done, that character of this kind of this new opportunity for affection coming into his life, his reasons for wanting to be with her, you come to find out, aren't specifically because she's sexy and he just wants to have an orgasm with and or inside of her. It has a lot more to do with the fact that she comes with baggage. She comes in his life with problems, and he has that, need. I know I have it. I'm a lot like that. So I related to this movie, and I imagine all guys like that are just itching watching this movie, because you want to fix her problems. And then as you become, her savior, then it's like, without actually asking the question, it does sort of ask the question, how are relationships not transactional? Because the minute he starts doing stuff for you, don't you owe him? And doesn't that mean that he's expecting something? And you get the feeling from her behavior like she knows that, and she's trying to like play on that to further invite him into this infidelity, which again, they kind of play it off in the movie like her long-term intention is to like lure him away from his marriage because she wants him forever. But again, the way the character's written, the way she plays it is so great, because you just nobody in the audience trusts that that's really what she wants. The truth is, she just wants, like, again, I just keep going back to scenes in the movie when she's talking about like when she's in the club And when
Yes.
she's talking to this dude, and she's like, "It's the first time in my life that this dude had no intention of trying to have sex with me," and she just realizes she's the old bitch in the club. Like
Hmm.
when you process that she has received the defeat of age, that now
Hmm.
she's no longer playing the young woman's game of just going out and getting all that attention and getting any guy she wants.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even that she's trying to jump ship to something more stable. It's
Mm-hmm.
that if she takes down Chris's character, she has won the battle of I'm aging and nobody wants me anymore because she got him. Does that make
Mm.
sense? So like it's this whole twisted, convoluted thing that's not even necessarily built exclusively into the dialogue, but
Mm-hmm.
performed so well into the dialogue as they're like, and into the scenes as they're acting off each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, you mean specifically like near the end when she was introducing him to the Wendell Pierce character Sean, who was like,
Yeah,
uh, yeah. So I get that very much. But yeah, as you say, it's basically she's trying to destroy his marriage. She's trying to have him all to herself, and because, as she put it, she's no longer the young, sexy thing
yeah.
anymore. She's now the older woman in the club, and I do find that very interesting that it's in the dialogue and it's played very well between the two actors in the scene. But yeah, I do find that to be, an interesting dynamic near the end of the movie. And there were some moments as I was watching the film, uh, just when just when she's introduced, as you mentioned, she's always in the scene with a cigarette. Like she starts smoking cigarettes, and she whenever she's in his office, whenever she's at a restaurant, whenever she
Yeah,
goes somewhere else, she always has a cigarette on her. Like that's sort of like
yeah.
something I noticed, that she's like sort of a long-term smoker, or I assume it's part of her character is what I'm thinking. Okay, so we're
I mean,
almost.
when you brought it up just now, I thought to myself, like, that's like an interesting kind of salacious, I
Mhm.
guess, tie-in with her character. And what's funny about that is, like, I didn't think about it until you mentioned it. It
Mhm.
feels like he's always asking her to put the cigarette out, which on
Mhm.
some like metaphorical level is him like asking her, like, please don't ask me to do something that's going to wreck my life. And then she always gives him that sly smile as she's putting
Mhm.
it out, where she's like, I'm going to ask you to wreck your life. And so it's kind of like an unspoken, like a visual, or yeah, it's some kind of like prop piece that allows the audience to really get a sense of like the intrigue, I guess she's trying to create.
Yes. Okay, so we're running up. So, okay, before we end the
Sorry.
show,
Okay.
yeah, okay. Do you think you would, so where can my audience find you, and on like on social media, and where can my viewers listen to to the podcast?
Great question. The podcast is wherever you listen: Spotify, Apple, Google. It's hosted on a website called Buzzsprout. But yeah, wherever you want to find it. It's called Heart Songs: the podcast. You can find it on all the socials at Heart Songs the podcast. You can find kind of my collective works, including that podcast, at www.blayrock.com. BLAYROCK. It's got the films. I kind of run this boutique label with a bunch of old bands that I used to be in and just other stuff that I've been able to like just listen to all that stuff, or at least find links to, Spotify or wherever you want to listen to it. So yeah, go there, hit me up, leave comments. I like, I don't know, hearing what people think about this stuff.
Okay, thank you so much, Adam. Um, and I love your recommendation, and I hope people will get to see this movie.
Me too.
Yes, okay. So this has been Jordan Ramirez signing off, and until then, I'll see you at the movies. And Adam, again, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Jordan.
Okay, thank you.